Tonight, Crimewatch is back with a special programme devoted to the thousands of child sexual abuse cases continuing to shock the nation.
It's not historical, it's yesterday, it's today. It never ever leaves you.
With exclusive access to the detectives tracking abusers down, we'll see justice being served firsthand.
It doesn't matter how long ago these offences were committed. They can go to the police, it can be reported, and it will be investigated.
And hear from the survivors at the heart of it all.
It might have been 40 years to get him there, but they got him in the end.
Plus, we're live at a specialist confidential call centre where more survivors can call in and tell their stories. It's time to fight back. Live for the next hour, this is Catching the Abusers, a Crimewatch special. Good evening and welcome to a new series of Crimewatch. Tonight we have a special episode dedicated to tackling child sex abuse. You can't have missed the recent revelations about abuse in football, but of course the problem goes much further than sport. And although many of the crimes we're looking at tonight happened decades ago, we believe there are people at home watching right now who've never spoken out about their experiences.
Yes, tonight we are coming to you live from Lilleshall in Shropshire. We've brought our mobile incident unit to this National Centre of Sporting Excellence, where today's leading sportsmen and women train to be the champions of tomorrow. It's been the home of elite sports for decades. The 1966 World Cup winning England football squad trained here, and many of Team GB's top Olympic and Paralympic athletes have spent years honing their skills using these world-class facilities. Today, in places like this and in organisations across the UK, the attitudes and safeguards around protecting children are very different from when much of the abuse took place.
There's also more cooperation with the charities who, as well as organising and advising on how to keep children safe, also offer a point of contact for people who've been abused. Tonight we are working closely with the NSPCC, who put in place a specialist call centre operation in Salford. John Kay is there for us. John.
Yes, as well as detectives standing by for your calls on the normal Crimewatch number tonight, there is another number you can ring if you've been affected by any of these issues or if you are a survivor of child sex abuse. If that is you, there are 35 specially trained counsellors from the NSPCC in this room waiting for your call this evening. They will listen to you in complete confidence. They can offer you support, guidance, advice. They can talk to you about how you might want to pass on your case to the police for further investigation. So the number's on your screen now, 0808 800 5000. It's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it's free to call from landlines and mobiles right across the UK.
Thanks, John. Also tonight, we'll have a roundup of other important appeals, plus the latest wanted faces and some shocking CCTV, including these masked women robbing a pensioner for his sandwiches, and also this idiotic fire starter who torched an industrial unit.
So what is the scale of child abuse we're talking about tonight? Well, Operation Hydrant, the national operation coordinating non-recent child abuse investigations across the UK, has provided Crimewatch with the very latest figures. They show that since the high-profile football abuse story broke in November, a total of 1,016 case referrals have been received by the Hydrant team. So far, 184 potential suspects have been identified and 248 football clubs impacted, meaning there are now 21 police forces across the UK actively investigating allegations of abuse in football. And of course, we're not just talking about football here. Currently, schools, children's homes, religious institutions, sports venues, medical establishments and scout-type groups all account for hundreds more allegations. In all, this means every single police force in the UK now has at least one live investigation into non-recent child sex abuse. The numbers are stark, but behind all of these statistics are the survivors themselves. Here are just a few of their stories.
I never wanted my mum to have that image of what happened to me.
It's the most horrible, loneliest place in the world.
If I said anything, nobody would believe me.
It destroyed me. I tried to hide it.
I do feel that the truth has set me free.
And you haven't got to hide in a dark corner anymore. It was never your fault.
Oh my God, it wasn't just me. And I'm not on my own.
Justice had been done, that I was believed.
And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Top of the Pops.
I just thought, I'm just going to die. That's how violent it was, and that's how rough it was. I'd done really well in my exams, and my mum said she'd take me away. And we ended up going to Jersey. Savile came into the bar. He was quite exciting, you know, as this guy from TV. It was the next morning after breakfast that this other girl and I were going down to the beach, and he was at the door of his van and called us over to take some photos. As soon as he grabbed me, it didn't feel right at all, and he was sort of thrusting his leg between my legs and was very, very physical, and took his vest off and got me to stand behind him. And he said, did we want to go and see inside the van? He followed us in and shut the door and locked the door. I never wanted my mum to have that image of what happened to me. I couldn't have gone to her and explained what had happened. I'm pretty glad that she never knew. People have misconceptions of children getting abused. They just don't get the real violence of it, the real fear that someone gets left with. Decades later, when it was in the press, a couple of women being interviewed, and I got a real sense that they just weren't being believed. I emailed ITN and said I'd been sexually assaulted by Savile and that I had photographs. And then it just really snowballed. I can remember getting an email saying, oh, there's now 30 women, and then within a week it was 100. It was massive seeing that and thinking that I wasn't the only one.
It's not historical. It's yesterday. It's today. It's 2 days ago. It never ever leaves you. I had respect for him. I had utmost respect. I wish I hadn't had respect for him and it wouldn't have hurt us so bad. Where it happened was, there was a statue of Jesus watching down on me. And I thought I was going to go to hell for the rest of my life. You daren't tell because you know you won't be believed. If you do tell, you'll be outcast. And it does ruin your life. I couldn't even see my children getting nappies changed, for God's sake. As I felt disgusted, knowing inside what happened to me. I used to leave the room. Not nice, is it? Wanting to tell my daughter how much I loved her and to kiss her and to hold her and say, I love you so much. And I couldn't. I urge anyone to come forward, and I mean anyone. If I can save one person of the life I've had to lead, I've done my job.
You can't trust anybody. That's been the philosophy of my life. I started being abused by a family member from the age of 2 to 3 onwards. I was told that if I said anything, I would be taken away because nobody would believe me, and I would never ever see any of my family again. Which, to a child, to tell them that's horrific. This person was supposed to look after me. He didn't. We had a teacher called Mr. Kilgour. We were asked to come and read to him. And you'd go up, and then with his right hand, he would creep up your leg into my pants. The dread. You're there and you're thinking, please don't shout my name, please don't shout my name. The headmaster told my dad that I was making it all up. It just reiterated what my family member had said. Nobody will believe you. But unbeknown to me, I wasn't the only victim. When I was rung and told that he got a guilty verdict, I cried because it was relief at last. It might have been 40 years to get him there, but they got him in the end.
He'd blackmailed me, he'd threatened me, he'd got into my mind. I had aspirations to be a professional footballer from a very young age. I joined the boys' club when I was sort of about 11-year-old. The coach was very kind at first. I had no inclination what was about to happen. He used to take me into a room alone. He pretended to be the physio, but had no qualifications whatsoever. And then it started off by just touching. I was scared. He would say, I'll drive you home. Then, on the way home, stop at car parks and perform sexual acts. He would say that if I didn't perform the acts, then he would tell the scouts I was no good, my training was poor, which, you know, tore my heart. You know, it tore my heart inside. My saving grace was, You know, when I played football, I was out of his way. That white line was my saviour, because I knew he couldn't get to us then. The scar it leaves is quite massive, although you can appear to be very, you know, outgoing or whatever, but inside I was just dying. I couldn't find a way of speaking out. And this is the reason why I'm coming out and speaking now, to tell people, you know, don't be ashamed. Don't live in silence like I did.
The story's out there, the people know about him. It's like a weight has been lifted.
You can come out now. You can tell everyone now. Don't be ashamed of it. It's not your fault. It was never your fault. You may blame yourself. It was never your fault.
I am pleased I spoke out. We've got a long way to go. But I do think the more things are spoken about, the more understanding. Information is education, and without knowing, then how does anything change?
Incredible stories, just heartbreaking there. And we're here tonight coming live from Lilleshall National Sports Centre in Shropshire. We moved inside now to the old country house part of the estate, where we are joined by a group of guests, all of whom have strong connections to tonight's subject matter. So let's start with Paul Stewart, former Tottenham and England footballer. There's no suggestion, by the way, that Lilleshall is connected to any of these cases, but you came forward as part of the revelations in November. What made you do that?
In truth, to encourage other people to come forward. I knew that there was a lot of people that suffered the same abuse as I suffered when I was a young child. I know how it impacts your life and how not the abuse while it's happening, but ongoing for the rest of your life, how it impacts your family. I really wanted to speak out and tell my story because I wanted others to feel that they could come forward, seek help, and not suffer like I suffered for many, many years.
And you found then that your abuser had died, is that right?
That's correct, but you know, in truth, it probably had more of an effect on my family than it did me, because my reasons for coming forward didn't change. It was purely and simply to help others, so that they could deal with the abuse, know that there's help out there, and ultimately go and seek help if that's what they needed.
Ian McFadden is a campaigner and survivor of abuse by teachers when you're at boarding school, Ian. So again, it's people in authority we're talking about.
Absolutely. It's abuse of power, not only sexual abuse, it's abuse of power of people who are in authority, who have charge of children. As a survivor of abuse, because those who we're entrusted to us abuse us, you know, we reel against authority. We fight against it at every stage in our lives, which creates huge issues for us as we're growing up and turning into adults.
Dr. Ellie Hansen is a clinical psychologist specialising in abuse and trauma who works with the National Crime Agency and the NSPCC. We heard a very strong appeal in the film there, Ellie, for people to come forward. But I guess for some it may not be that simple.
I mean, I think it's absolutely fantastic that so many people are coming forward now, and I'm sure that they will continue to do so. In parallel with that, we have to recognise that it won't be the right decision for everybody to speak to the police. For some people, the fears are just going to be too great and the costs are going to be too high. And for those that do talk to the police, they're going to be needing to take it and the police are going to need to be earning that survivor's trust step by step, showing that they are taking it seriously, that they are proactively investigating.
Jane Molyneux, your Sport England strategic lead on children and young people. Can we be sure that these sporting institutions have changed, that children are safer in them?
We can never ever afford to be complacent, and there's always things that we can do to improve the system. Sports now take safeguarding very, very seriously. They work really hard with their clubs on the ground. They have policies and procedures. There are trusted welfare officers that if anybody's not quite sure or something's not quite right, they can actually go and talk to people who listen to them, trusted people. We've also helped to set up with the NSPCC the Child Protection in Sport unit, which is the only type of unit of its kind in the world.
As survivors, do you two, Paul and Ian, believe that that's working, all of that?
Personally, no. And part of me, my direction has changed now. I'm working with a group of survivors, ex-footballers with the FA, who have assured us that they will listen to us, take on board what we are trying to do to make sure that safeguarding is paramount so that it never ever happens to children again.
Ian, what do you think?
I think that all institutions that are involved around child protection are learning hard and fast lessons. It encourages me if people are being proactive with regards to this, because it's been swept away and covered up for decades, and it's endemic in our country. All I can say is we have to offer people opportunities to implement change for children. This is not about people like Paul and I. The damage is done to us. It's about future protection of future generations to come.
Well, you're mentioning the damage there, Ellie. You work with damaged people, and we should always come back to the fact that this goes now, that what they suffer goes with them through their lives often.
Yeah, I mean, the way that I would really see it is that if you are going through that incredibly traumatic and difficult experience as a child, when you don't have a framework for understanding it, you haven't got the coping skills of an adult, you find a way to survive it, you adapt. And actually, that enables you to get through it. But unfortunately, those adaptations can leave people with problems further down the line. So I would see it as survival skills rather than damage, as it were.
Jane, any advice to parents just who are worried that where they're putting their child, how do they know it's safe?
Well, they just need to ask some questions. So, if you take your child along to a sports club or activity, there's just some simple questions to ask. So do you know anything about the person who is leading or supporting that session? Do they have the right qualifications? Are there any procedures in place? And if a child has any concerns, who do they need to go to that will listen to them, that will give them some advice and take it seriously? I always say you'd never take a child, leave them in the middle of a field and walk away. And yet you take them to a sports club or activity without knowing anything about the person that's leading them. So just ask some simple questions.
Paul, Ian, Jane, Ellie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's cross over to John Kay now, who's in tonight's specialist call centre in Salford. John.
Yeah, Jeremy, it's only a few minutes, isn't it, since we gave out the number of this special helpline for survivors of child sexual abuse. Almost as soon as we gave out the number, the phones here started ringing, and I think pretty much every one of the 35 specially trained counsellors who are here are now on calls, talking to people, some of them speaking for the very first time about something that's happened to them. Now, if that's you and you want to know what happens when you ring this NSPCC number, Sandra, you're running the helpline tonight. Talk us through it. What happens?
You can talk to us. It's the first stage. You don't have to even give us your name. It's about having a conversation about what's happened to you and what you'd like to do next. I guess one of the things we would like to know from you is, are there other children who are at risk at the moment? And is there something we can do about that now? So if the person who's abused you has also abused, other children, or has been in a position of trust and responsibility, then we need to make sure that that abuse stops.
And although we've been focusing on historical, non-recent child sexual abuse, you're also keen to hear from people who might know what's going on right now.
Yes, we want to make sure that no child gets abused, and so the helpline is here for anybody who has a concern for a child and wants to report that, or just simply wants some advice because they're struggling with an issue themselves.
OK, Sandra, for now, thank you very much indeed. I know I can tell from the volume in here how busy it is. That number again, this is just the helpline number tonight, 0808 800 5000.
Thanks, John. Right, still to come tonight. An exclusive insight into how detectives brought a child abuser operating at one of Britain's most prestigious schools to justice.
For the complainants in this case, they've carried this around for 30 years, and it has had a massive impact. Pat was a very popular teacher. Although he was a geography teacher, he also taught rowing. So he spent a lot of time with boys inside the school, but also outside the school. He was a classic groomer of children.
But we've got wanted faces first, starting with Nyron Parker Lee. Murder squad detectives from the West Midlands would like to speak to him after a man was stabbed to death in Brierley Hill in October. As you can see, the 19-year-old has a large scar on his forehead. He also has a tattoo of the word mum on his right wrist and is known to have friends across the West Midlands and possibly in London.
This is 33-year-old Neil Daniel Brennan. Detectives say he's very dangerous, so don't approach him. He was jailed for attempted murder after stabbing a man multiple times at a party. Brennan, who also calls himself Tom Ford, was released from prison on temporary licence, but has now gone on the run. As you can see, he's a master of disguise. This picture on the left shows him last year, and the CCTV image is him as well. He's known to stay in Cheshire, Bury and the Blackley area of Manchester.
Face number 3 is 33-year-old Ahmad Nadeem. Now, the taxi driver was arrested over an allegation of rape and released on police bail, but hasn't returned for further questioning. Originally from Pakistan, Nadeem has links to Manchester, Slough and across Surrey.
Finally, for now, is 31-year-old Michael Peter Martin. Detectives in Cheshire think he may have information about a plan to blow up a cash machine, and they'd like to speak to him about it. Martin has a scar above his left ear and links to Salford and across Lancashire.
If you know where any of tonight's faces might be, please do get in touch on 08085 600 600. Calls are free from landlines and mobiles, and we'll go through the rest of the lineup a little later.
It's time now to take a look at our roundup of criminals caught on camera. And be warned, the first case involves a nasty stabbing.
Outside a nightclub in Manchester city centre, and these men have been refused entry. A scuffle breaks out with the doorman. Watch the man with the distinctive top closely. He takes something out of his waistband and walks over to the doorman, who's facing the other way. He then stabs him in the top of his leg. The security man later needed 5 stitches to the stab wound. Who is this man in the bright jacket? Police need a name tonight. A woman is returning home late on a Friday night, completely unaware she's being followed. As she parks on her driveway, a group of men suddenly rush towards her. Terrified, she sounds her horn for help. Her husband runs out from the house and tries to fight off the robbers, but he's easily outnumbered. They struggle with his wife, eventually grabbing her handbag before fleeing. These low-life thugs took around £3,000 in cash and the woman's bank cards, but they also left her badly shaken. Police want to speak to this man, who they believe was caught on camera using the stolen cards the next day. Who are they? Doncaster in South Yorkshire. A quad bike drives past. A car on the opposite side suddenly stops. You can just see its headlights as it does a 3-point turn in the road. It's waiting for another quad bike. As soon as he comes past, the car chases, trying to force it off the road. Seconds later, they smash him into a parked car. The quad bike rider suffered severe brain injuries and is still in hospital. Detectives would like to speak to the occupants of this car, seen at a petrol station earlier that evening, as they may have vital information. Call now if you know anything about the crash, which has left a family man with life-changing injuries. This pensioner is getting ready to open a rural petrol station in Norfolk, but these two are lying in wait. As the 78-year-old goes to lift the shutters, they strike, punching the pensioner and dragging him to the floor. Police believe these thugs are women. They take his rucksack and one puts the boot in again. They beat up the worker for his bag, which had no cash, just his hat and his sandwich box inside. Despicable. Who are they? Look closely in the bottom left-hand corner. This bird's eye view shows a man smashing his way into an industrial unit in Buckinghamshire. As he sprints into the warehouse, we get a good look at his face. Do you recognise him? He squirts liquid from the bottle he's carrying all over the stock of newspapers and magazines. Then lights it. But he's not finished yet. On his way out, he sets the loading area ablaze too. The warehouse quickly goes up in flames, totally gutting the building. Thankfully, on this occasion, no one was hurt, but around £30,000 worth of stock was destroyed. This dangerous fire starter needs to be caught. Name him.
Call on the usual Crimewatch number 08085 600 600 if you can name anyone we've just shown, or you can text us on 63399. Just type crime space and then your message. Text will be charged at your standard message rate. And remember, you can also follow all of the developments during the programme on our live updates webpage.
More cases the police are asking for your help with now. Starting with an urgent appeal to find this man, convicted murderer Sean Colin Walmsley. He escaped from 3 prison officers who were taking him to a hospital appointment in Liverpool on Tuesday last week. 2 men who are believed to have had a knife and a gun threatened the officers and demanded his release. The murderer and his accomplices then escaped in this gold-coloured Volvo. Detectives believe the car with the registration MW02XHE had been parked near to Aintree Hospital earlier that day. Did you see that car, or do you know anything about the escape? Detectives say Walmsley is dangerous, having been convicted of a vicious and savage murder. So if you see him, don't approach, just call 999.
Next, we have some truly shocking images of 80-year-old Tommy Ward. He was brutally attacked in his home in Maltby in Rotherham overnight on the 30th of September 2015. He suffered horrific injuries and died 5 months later. Whoever attacked Tommy that night also stole this cash box from his house. It was later found dumped, but his life savings of around £30,000 are still missing.
They've stolen what he's worked for and what he's kept. And they've stole his life, and they've stole my kid's grandfather, and they've stole my dad. We're just in a long, dark tunnel. There's just don't seem no light at the end of it at the moment.
Tonight, detectives hunting for Tommy's killer or killers want your help to identify the occupants of this car seen near his home on the night of the attack. They believe it's a Saab 9-3. Do you know who was in that car that night or anything about that specific vehicle? Please call using the numbers on screen if you can help.
Next, a potentially significant new development in the disappearance of Catrice Lee. The 2-year-old went missing whilst shopping with her mum near the British military base where the family lived in Paderborn in Germany on the 28th of November 1981. It was her 2nd birthday. Despite extensive police searches, Catrice has never been found.
Today, I could be sitting here being a grandmother and I know nothing about that. I've missed my daughter growing up, missed her teenage years. On Mother's Day, I'm always a card short.
Now, detectives from the Royal Military Police need your help to identify this man. An eyewitness saw him carrying a small child into a green saloon vehicle at the time of Catrice's disappearance. Do you recognise him or know anyone similar who may have been in the area in 1981? If so, do get in touch.
On Saturday, the 12th of December 2015, 56-year-old Mumtaz member was found murdered at her home in Homefield Avenue in Leicester. It was a vicious and seemingly motiveless attack on a devoted wife, mother and grandmother. Tonight, police need your help to identify these 4 people seen on CCTV on Homefield Avenue on the night of the murder. They are keen to stress they are witnesses who may have information that could help the inquiry and are not suspects. There is a Crime Stoppers reward of up to £10,000 for information which leads to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for Mumtaz's murder. They are on 0800 555 111.
So, still to come tonight, an exclusive look at how detectives catch the child abusers who think they've got away with it.
What we're really looking for are trophies, items that they've kept that help them relive some of the offending. We went through every reel. We found some film of Barry with some children carrying out exactly the same acts as were described by witnesses who came forward.
More wanted faces first, starting with Lee Jason Stewart. Merseyside police think he may have vital information about the assault of a woman in April last year. He's also a registered sex offender and has breached an order to tell the police where he's living. Stewart is 40 with a Liverpudlian accent and has links across the Wirral area of Merseyside.
Face number 6 is David Paul Garner, although you may know him as David Bray, David Harris or David Martin. He was charged with a number of theft and fraud offences, but failed to appear at Warwick Crown Court and is now on the run. Garner is 36 and you may have seen him across Sussex, Leicestershire or Warwickshire.
Do you recognise this man? He's 33-year-old Omar, although this is an old photograph. He too uses many names, including Alia, Abdullah, Ali and Versam. He was due to be sentenced at Bristol Crown Court on a drug dealing charge, but didn't turn up. Originally from Somalia, Omar now has contacts in the Netherlands, Bristol, London and Leicester.
And finally tonight we have 20-year-old Radu Ion. Now, he was due to appear in court in London on a firearms offence but didn't turn up and is now wanted. Ion has a Romanian accent and links to Leeds, Essex and across London. He has a tattoo of a dragon emerging from an egg on his right arm.
If you know where any of the faces are, then please get in touch using the numbers on screen. You can find all the details on our websites alongside more people the police need your help to locate.
OK, we're just over halfway through tonight's special programme. So let's see how things are going in the Salford call centre. John?
Yeah, Jeremy, tonight, as well as the normal Crimewatch appeal number, we have this special helpline number for people who have been or maybe are currently victims of child sexual abuse. The number on your screen now, 0808 800 5000. It has been very busy in here, nearly 100 calls already tonight, some of them from people who've never spoken before. Let's have a quick chat with Sandra, who's running the helpline. Sorry to interrupt. Just talk us through, what kind of calls have you been getting?
Oh, we've been getting all sorts of calls. We've getting a lot of calls from older people who've never talked about being abused before, and it's their first opportunity to come through and talk about that. They don't always want action taken, but they do want their stories heard. But we're also getting calls from people who are worried about children now, or people who were abused in institutional settings. So it's a whole range.
OK, I'll let you get back to it. Thank you very much indeed. That helpline only number on your screen right now, and that goes on beyond the end of tonight's programme. It's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline.
Of course, as well as speaking to trained counsellors, callers to the NSPCC hotlines can ask for their case to be referred to the police. But once detectives receive information about abuse years, sometimes decades down the line, how do they go about investigating it and bringing the perpetrators to justice? For the first time ever, the Operation Hydrant teams have allowed our cameras in to find out how they do it, from call to conviction.
It makes you wonder, after 40 years, why you didn't say anything before. It's harrowing to think that one person has ruined half your life.
The most difficult thing with investigating these types of crimes is actually gaining the victim's trust.
A modern crime, we've got forensic opportunities. We've got CCTV. But with this, that's all gone.
Trying to remember something from 20 or 30 years ago is a really complex thing for somebody.
Giving evidence is incredibly difficult. It doesn't matter who you are, when you're there standing in that box, you must feel incredibly alone.
I was extremely anxious about being cross-examined. It was grim. It was really, really hard.
A lot of people can't understand why the police spend so much time, so much money investigating historical allegations. For the complainants in this case, they've carried this around for 30 years, and it has had a massive impact.
For the past 2 years, DC Kim Prosser has been working on the investigation into Patrick Marshall, a former teacher at the prestigious St Paul's School, London.
Pat was a very popular teacher. Although he was a geography teacher, he also taught rowing. So he spent a lot of time with boys inside the school, but also outside the school. He was a classic groomer of children.
He is one of several former St Paul's teachers accused of abusing children between the 60s and the 90s. 2 have already been found guilty. Investigations like this are overseen in the UK by Operation Hydrant.
Hydrant's role is very specific in that it assists forces nationally to coordinate their investigations.
Their priority is making sure children today are not at risk from named abusers.
Take it on 20 years, and have they still got access to children, grandchildren, new families, new clubs they're involved in?
Then it's over to the detectives to investigate.
You're looking for cooperation, you're looking for consistency. And with historical cases, finding that cooperation is one of the real challenges.
A good example of where corroborative evidence has been very powerful in a prosecution is where a victim mentioned that the offender had written telephone numbers on a wall. Years later, the same premises were visited, the wallpaper was removed, and those telephone numbers were still there. It's things like that that can be very, very powerful in proving that that offence took place.
But the drive to gather that proof has not always been the police's top priority.
Historically, police forces may have looked at an account of non-recent sexual abuse and just thought, you know what, it's too hard to investigate this, so we're not going to.
I've pushed and pushed and pushed so that people would investigate. I kind of thought that it would have been an easier process.
Between the ages of 9 and 13, Ian McFadden suffered systematic abuse and even rape at the hands of a number of his teachers at Caldecott School in Buckinghamshire.
You can feel your heart beating through your clothes. You can feel every breath you're taking. Just the terror, but I didn't know what was going on. I used heroin for the first time when I was 12. And my life from 13 up until probably 30 has been a maelstrom of drug and alcohol abuse.
If a survivor had a drugs and alcohol problem, they were emotionally numb about what happened, or for example, they had a chaotic lifestyle, all of these things were seen to kind of be black marks against that victim, rather than being understood as very normal consequences of the abuse experience. I think it's fair to say that police have dramatically improved their approach to the investigation of sexual abuse.
Police are becoming better informed. They're better educated about people such as myself and the way I behave.
When the police take a survivor-centred approach, it's a win-win situation. It's obviously best for the survivor, but it also helps the police gather their best evidence, increasing the chance of conviction.
At the Met, it's the day before Patrick Marshall's trial is due to start.
Yeah, go down and I'll just bring the last bits down by stair. A lot of the work is done behind the scenes. I think in this case, we must have come up with, I don't know, 600, 700, 800 documents, and each one of them has to be read.
Many of these were sourced from the St Paul's School archive.
We have to help the police in every way we can to ensure that justice is done. What we thought they might need would be personnel files, but in fact it was much of the detail of the activities that were going on in the school in the 1970s and 80s that enabled the police to authenticate and verify the testimony that they were receiving.
We were lucky enough to be able to draw on pupils' leavers cards, which obviously will hold a whole host of information. And actually one of those cards was invaluable in our trial.
The message is really, really clear. It's not for you to bring the evidence to the police. Our job is to look for things that may corroborate it, so to seek the truth.
DI Paul Brown led the investigation into Barry Warren, a scoutmaster in King's Lynn during the 70s and 80s.
Mr. Warren had a boat on the Broads, and he would invite children from the scout group to have a weekend away on the boat. You wouldn't ever think there was a dark side to it all.
In fact, Warren was systematically grooming the children in his care.
He would embark upon games with the children. So he had a particular dare game where the dares would start moving into a very sexual area.
By the time police came to investigate, it was more than 20 years later. But there were striking similarities between his accusers' accounts.
And they're all giving those accounts independently and some years later on, and then we start to draw some key similar factors out of that, and one of those was this orange jumper.
Warren's victims said he wore the jumper while he abused them.
Barry was really clear, and he described them as fanciful allegations made up by some children with very vivid imaginations.
But then detectives searched Warren's home.
What we're really looking for are trophies, items that they've kept that help them relive some of the offending.
They found a photo of Warren wearing the orange jumper and the dare game his victims described. But they also seized dozens of reels of cine film.
We went through every reel. We found some film of Barry with some children carrying out exactly the same acts as were described by witnesses who came forward.
Sadly, the victims caught on film have never been identified. Just some of the many survivors of abuse who have not yet come forward.
It makes you wonder, after sort of 40 years, why you didn't say anything before. And it's harrowing to think that one person has ruined sort of half your life.
Warren was not the only offender to leave evidence of his crimes. Diaries, notes, and even hospital blueprints have all been used to link child abusers to the crimes they thought were consigned to their past.
Well, I'll let you know if anything happens. All right then, see you later. Bye.
The jury is out in the trial of Patrick Marshall, a former teacher at St Paul's School, London.
I'm not anxious for myself, but I've got 12 people who are incredibly anxious about the result, and I think you just take on the anxiousness for them. This trial in particular really took over my life probably for a period of about 8 months. I just think it was so important that we did it everything right.
2 days later, the verdict is in.
Patrick Marshall was found guilty on all 25 charges. I am absolutely thrilled. Today is definitely the right result. It was the right verdict.
The nature of the case just reinforced that sense of shock and what an appalling act it was.
Hearing them in quick succession, guilty, 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 there was an almost instantaneous response, I felt, of a weight being lifted.
When somebody has gone through their life fearing that they won't be believed, to finally find that you are, and people care that it happened to you and are outraged that it happened to you, that can have a profound impact.
I encourage you to step forward and speak out. It's my silence that maintained my abuser's safety.
We are now at a moment where we're facing sexual abuse in a way that we haven't done before, and overriding our desire to turn away is the desire to acknowledge, to make amends, to do something different, to actually tackle this problem.
Even though these offences happened such a long time ago, just to know that if they come to the police, they will be taken seriously and they will be listened to.
Well, Chief Constable Simon Bailey, who's in charge of Operation Hydrant, is with me now live, along with Professor Mark Bailey, no relation, who's the current High Master of St Paul's School, which we saw featured in that film. And Mark, first of all, what would you say to a school that finds itself in the position that you did?
First of all, support the police and help them as much as possible to ensure that justice is done. Secondly, when it's appropriate, to reach out to survivors and apologise and learn from them. And thirdly, just make sure that the safeguarding that you have in your school in the present time is as safe and strong as it can possibly be.
And are children safer in schools now than they were 30 years ago?
Yes, there's a national framework of safeguarding now that compels all schools to train staff, to educate children, and to ensure there's safer recruitment. So the systems are so much stronger than they were 30 years ago. But the key thing is that it creates a culture in which children feel able to talk, that staff are alert and aware to signs of abuse, and it reduces the risk and increases the deterrent of paedophiles operating in schools.
Chief Constable, we've heard about schools changing and football clubs and so on. The police have had to change as well, haven't they?
Yes, I mean, there's been a fundamental change since 2012, post-Savile. There's absolutely no doubt that we have had to come to terms with the scale of abuse, the skills that are required, and the fact that officers need particular skills to be able to deal with the reports that you've heard about tonight. We've made significant changes. There is no doubt in my mind that the response that we've put in place has improved beyond all comprehension, and I'm delighted with that response, and credit must go to all those officers who on a daily basis are dealing with cases like the ones you've heard this evening, the cases that will inevitably come in as a result of tonight's programme, because they're the ones that are having to deal with this on a daily basis.
And when you get a conviction, it's not necessarily the end of the story, is it?
No, and again, it's quite often the case that further victims will have the confidence and courage to come forward and report their abuse at the hands of the person that has just been convicted. It is something that we have to deal with.
Things are changing, Mark, aren't they?
Yes, and there can be no guarantees, but as long as there's greater awareness and alertness, then the chances of early intervention are much, much higher.
Thank you both very much indeed, Simon and Mark. And with that in mind, please just take a look at these images. This is 70-year-old Mark Frost. He's a retired English teacher and he used to go by the name Andrew Tracy. Now, last month he was jailed for life after admitting 45 sex offences against young boys in England and Thailand. But the National Crime Agency are convinced there are still more victims out there, many of whom may never have spoken about what happened to them. They've set up a dedicated helpline and are now encouraging any other victims to get in touch to get the support and help they need. The free phone number to call is 0800 328 0904. More details are on the Crimewatch website, where there's also more information about other organisations which can offer help and advice. Plus, it is worth knowing that any victims of crime can speak to victim support, who are on 0808 1689 111. And now let's have a final check on the latest from the call centre in Salford. John.
Yeah, Jeremy, they say they've been overwhelmed by the number of calls they've had in here at the NSPCC in the last hours. Hundreds of calls already talking about abuse that's happened to people in care homes, in schools, throughout education, even within families. Some of those cases go back a long way. Some people saying that they want those cases to go on to the police for further investigation. Remember, if you're waiting to get through, this is a 24-hour helpline. It doesn't finish when the programme finishes. You can call tomorrow if you like. So the number again, 0808 800 5000. 0808 800 5000. They say they are ready to take your call when you are ready to talk.
Thanks, John. We've just got time for a very quick update on tonight's other cases. Vicky, earlier we saw truly shocking images of Tommy Ward being brutally attacked in his own home. Are you any closer to finding Tommy's killers?
We've had a number of people phoning in, and I'd like to thank the public for doing so. However, if you are sat on your sofa and you have that information, that key piece of information, knowing what has happened to Tommy, then please ring us. In regards to the CCTV, I need to know who owned that Saab 9-3 that was on that road during that night and who was in that vehicle. So I'm urging the public to please still contact us. There is a £10,000 reward leading to the arrest and conviction of the offenders for this nasty attack on this innocent, vulnerable man.
OK, Vicky, thank you very much indeed. Mick Mumtaz member was also murdered in her own home, a seemingly motiveless attack. Have you had any useful information?
We've had some information tonight, but I would appeal to those people that do have further information to give us a call. I'm still very keen to identify the 4 males that were seen walking along the road.
OK, thank you very much. Please do keep those calls coming in.
Well, that is just about all we have for you on what's been really quite a remarkable night. We've heard about some of the worst crimes imaginable, but it's been incredible to see how many people have called in for the first time. Let us hope it will help bring more offenders to justice.
Details of organisations offering information and support with child sexual abuse are also available at bbc.co.uk/actionline, or you can call free at any time to hear recorded information on 0800 077 077. Remember, you can head over right now to the Crimewatch website, where we'll be streaming live with all the latest developments on tonight's appeals, wanted faces and CCTV.
Next week we are investigating the madness on our roads. Why is it that when so many of us get behind a wheel, we lose the plot?
Normally mild-mannered people are prepared to be aggressive behind the wheel. They've got so cross that they feel they have to do something. Unfortunately, what they're doing is using 2 tons of metal to express their frustration.
That's coming next week, Monday, live at 9 on BBC One.
But for now, thank you so much for all of your calls. They really do make a difference.
From everyone here at Lillishall and the team in Salford, goodbye.
Goodbye.